So hi, um, happy Sunday. Today I wanted to share a little bit about why I called my business The Kindest Thing. And many people who have come to my retreats or maybe come to my classes might already know a little bit about this, but I thought I'd go in a bit more depth. And I call it The Kindest Thing because I based it on a question that I think is really important for us to be asking ourselves, which is, what is the kindest thing I can say to myself? And why do I think that's so important? Well, so when we're younger, some of you may already know this, we develop a certain attachment style. And that's dependent on the way our primary caregiver related to us in the first few years of life. And this attachment pattern can be put into two categories. There's secure attachment and then there's insecure attachment. Neither's right or wrong, it's just literally how we adapted when we were younger unconsciously. So we have, within the insecure, we have subcategories. There's avoidant. And so in that case, the child maybe would have reached out to get a need met. And then for whatever reason, the primary caregiver didn't notice or wasn't able to meet that need or care for that child in the way the child maybe needed to be cared for. And so the child kind of, as a protection, went into an avoidance pattern, which would look like, well, I don't need you. I can take care of myself. And underneath this avoidance, the deep desire for love, but due to feeling so much hurt from it not being received, the child kind of was like, well, I don't care. I can do it myself. I don't need you. And some of these patterns you might be able to see on yourself or maybe notice in other people. And again, no judgment, they're not right or wrong, it's just how we adapted. And then we have anxious, and that could look a bit like, do you love me? Are you sure you love me? Can you just tell me you love me? Can you tell me you love me, please, please, please? And then we have ambivalent, which is kind of this movement. Go away, come here, go away, come here. It's kind of like, I don't really know. Do I want you? Do I not want you? I don't know. And then we have disorganized, and disorganized comes usually from when the child may have been emotionally or physically abused, and it creates disorganization in the child's system because the person the child seeks the most love from is also the most dangerous. So the child doesn't really know, am I going to get love? Am I going to get abuse? So we kind of fall into a dominant one. Not many people are fully secure. I mean, they can be, but it's just good to know all of them. And some of them patternings may come out in you with certain people, depending on what the other person's dominant is as well. And you can also, throughout your life, create an earned secure attachment. And that is when you become more conscious of your attachment style and potential wounding, and actively try and change that and work with it. And why is this relevant? Well, as well as having attachment styles outside of ourselves, with people, families, friends, intimate relationships, we also have a relationship with different parts of ourselves internally. And this is what the kindest thing is about. Sorry, it keeps going dark. And this is what the kindest thing is about. Because with these various parts of ourselves, some of them we're really proud of, some of them we love. We're like, oh yeah, I'm really selfless and I'm like great at this, I'm great at that. And then there's also parts that maybe we feel ashamed of, and that we don't really want to own or take responsibility for, or that we don't feel are worthy or good, or we judge as wrong. And I've spoken about this a few times, but with those parts we tend to repress them unconsciously, and then they turn into our shadow. And in order to kind of come into wholeness as a human being, into full integration, we need to turn towards all our parts, both the light and the dark. And I believe the best way to do this is by asking the question, what is the kindest thing I can say to myself? Because underneath these parts that maybe we deem as wrong, or not okay, underneath them is actually a lot of wisdom. So I speak about this quite a bit. For example, depression, underneath it can be actually repressed anger, I've noticed a lot. Or as someone, a good friend, Jeff Foster, he says, it's a need for deep rest. So, and this is how I work with clients as well. A lot of people come in and they're like, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, I'm suicidal. And we over-identify with these parts of ourselves. And what I do, and what different forms of therapy can do, is you take this part and you put it on a pillow. So you put it outside of yourself. So it's not really you, and then you get to dialogue with it. So instead of kind of being like, this is all encompassing, this is all I am, you can start to actually get a bit of space from it. And by doing that, and what I've noticed with my clients, is that by dialoguing with these parts, you start to realize that actually they're very young, innocent, ultimately, parts that have kind of created this kind of maladaptive coping mechanism that was good at the time, but maybe doesn't work anymore. And by us moving towards these parts of ourselves with kindness rather than judgment or fear, which is an automatic reaction in us due to the collective unconscious that we are born into and the level of consciousness that we're at, we tend to judge these parts and be like, well, I should be better, I should be stronger, I shouldn't be depressed, I should be relaxed all the time, I should be able to cope. Rather than turning towards it and being like, okay, why am I feeling these feelings? What is underneath them? And underneath it is usually fear. And so by dialoguing with these parts, we can actually be like, hey, what's going on, little one? And actually start to be kind to ourselves around it. And through the kindness, these parts can start to feel safer with us. So we become the secure attachment to ourselves that we always wished for when we were younger in some way. So, if that makes sense. So we create an attachment outside ourselves, but we're also starting to create this secure attachment within ourselves, so that no matter what happens outside ourselves, we know that we have ourselves, that we can always come back to ourselves and hold ourselves with kindness. And sometimes it can be hard. Sometimes we have to be kind to the part that has no idea how to be kind. I work with a lot of people and I ask this question, depending on the situation, but like, what is the kindest thing you can say to yourself around this? And people find it very hard. Like, they just can't. They have no idea what would be a kind thing to say, because we think on some level that to be kind means that we're kind of like not pushing ourselves, or we won't change. Like, it's not okay. We somehow have to punish ourselves or have to judge ourselves. And that's just simply not true. In order for change to happen, it actually needs to be done through compassion and kindness rather than resistance and judgment. You can tell in your body that sensation, like if you've done something wrong and someone comes at you with judgment versus someone that comes to you with kindness, it's a very different, you kind of like soften when it's kindness. You're like, oh, okay. And then with that kindness and understanding, it allows you to take responsibility, because when we're judged, we kind of go into defense mode. But when we are kind of allowing ourselves to be open towards these parts of ourselves and kind of understand them a bit more, then they start to soften, and we can take responsibility because we realize they're coming from an innocent place that's ultimately usually just trying to protect us. I was going to say something else, and there's a really good story about this. So the Dalai Lama, I like this story. Some person was with the Dalai Lama and he was like, oh, that's so weird. The story's about a dog. That's weird. And this person was with Dalai Lama, and he saw across the street a man kicking a dog, not that dog. And the guy was like, "Isn't that horrific? Like, how can there be such horrid people in the world?" Blah 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 blah. And then the Dalai Lama turned and said, "Yes, we must have kindness for the dog, obviously, but in truth, we must have the most kindness for the man, because the man, in order to be doing such a horrendous act, must have such deep pain inside of him." And so that is really like the true form of compassion and kindness that we need to give ourselves, because when we act wrong or whatever, when we act angry, underneath it, it's just so much pain. And we don't heal this pain through judgment. We heal it through kindness and compassion and understanding. And only then can we really forgive ourselves and forgive others. So this is why I think this question is so profound, to start asking yourself on a regular basis, and to start having kindness towards yourself for those parts that don't even know how to be kind, that we're never really taught how to be kind to ourselves. It's not really something we're taught. We're taught to change and adapt and do better and push ourselves. And yes, that can happen. We can still take action. We can still evolve and change. But the change comes from a place of kindness and softness and gentleness and openness and understanding, rather than "you're not good enough," or "as you are." It comes from like, okay, you're trying your hardest. Your level of consciousness is what it is through your experiences. If you had a higher level of consciousness, you would have acted differently in any other moment. And it's the same with other people. So I hope this makes sense a little bit. And I encourage you to maybe start asking yourself this Christmas. And I did a video recently about how Christmas can sometimes bring up a lot for people, because we're around family and other things. And just really trying to find that. It's almost like an archetypal mother. That's actually how I started getting into this kind of like way of thinking, is just really trying to channel this kind of archetypal mother. What would she say? What's the kindest thing she would say to me? We kind of have this deep very unconscious belief that there's this like man judging us in the sky. And so we need to punish ourselves if we've done something wrong. And it's just a complete misalignment, and it's just so far from what the truth is. Instead, maybe think of a benevolent mother in the sky. Might be more true to what is actually holding us in every moment. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to share today. I think maybe just one thing. This is a bit of a longer video because I wanted to go a bit more in depth. But sorry, that's for drains. I live in a house of like 23 people. There's a lot of noise. I speak a lot about this silence and stillness. And this I'm going to go into more detail in another video. But part of this human journey is to become aware of this innate silence and stillness beneath our thoughts, beneath the person we have taken ourselves to be. Even in this moment, see if you can notice that there's this kind of ever-present stillness and silence beneath the words that I speak, beneath the sound coming in your ears. There's this beautiful stillness. And my way of working is to help people become aware of this self, this true self that we are before we come into form, before we take on this identity as a person. To really become aware of this silence and stillness, and then move towards these kind of human parts of ourselves that ultimately just need our love and holding. And I feel like this is a really beautiful way to do it, because when we're fully in the mind, there can be so much judgment and confusion and overwhelm, and we can get lost very easily. But when we come back to this kind of innate peace and stillness beneath all of it that is always present, and from this place move towards the human, things shift much quicker, much easier. We can hold them with a bit more lightness. It's not about bypassing. There's a lot of ways we can sometimes, once we become aware of the self beyond the mind, we can use that as a way to avoid the human and be like, oh, well, I'm not my mind, I'm not my body, I don't need to look at it. But actually, in order to be an integrated human, and on this journey why we've incarnated at this time, is to become aware of ourself beyond form, and then integrate this formlessness into our form and move towards all these human parts of ourselves that really just need our love, acceptance and holding. I'm writing a book now called How We Can Hold the Story but Hold It Lightly. How do we hold it? We're not wanting to run away from it, we're not wanting to bypass it, but how do we hold it with lightness? And we do that by becoming aware that we are not just our story, that there's a part beyond it that we want to connect with. And from that place we can move towards it. Anyway, someone's at my door, so I have to go. It sounds like it's time to go. I'm running what are my events coming up right now? I have a event on Wednesday called An Evening of Being, where we'll be kind of really dropping more deeply into this sense of being beneath the mind and the story. It's a very potent time at the moment because we have full moon, the last one of the year, this coming week, and 2020 is going to be a very big year, and so it's a really beautiful opportunity to release all that's no longer serving us, so we can then move towards 2020 with a bit more lightness and clarity and ease. And this evening will really be allowing us to drop into that stillness, the stillness of winter. And hopefully my hope is to give everyone a sense of groundedness before moving into the more kind of dynamic Christmas time. Connect to that kind of inner security and safety that's unaffected by anything around it. And then I'm doing my last class in London of the year on Friday the 13th from 6 till 7:30. And then got one space, potentially 2 spaces left for my winter solstice retreat on the 21st. And that's going to be quite a magical day. Lots of ritual, because winter solstice is kind of a sign that the light is very slowly starting to come back in. So it's a celebration of both the dark and the light, similar to what I've been speaking about. I remember this, darkness doesn't exist in and of itself. It's just a negation of light. So as soon as we bring the light in, it just melts away. And then I'm doing, I've got a new date for a New Year retreat, and that's all going to be about manifesting and how we can connect more deeply to the stillness, and from that place manifest. A lot of us manifest from the mind, from fear and from lack, rather than from the kind of innate wholeness that we are. And things become much easier and quicker when we do it from that space. And I'm doing special offers, so if you book on that retreat before the 20th of December, I think, then you get 20% off. And I'm also offering 20% off all healing sessions, one-on-one meditation and sound healing that's valid until 31st of December. So yeah, do get in touch if you're interested or know anyone who might be. And I just really encourage you to, keep asking, what is the kindest thing? What is the kindest thing I can say to myself today? You made a mistake. Okay, what is the kindest thing you can say to yourself around that? Well, you didn't mean to make a mistake. You're trying your hardest. You're doing amazing. That's the kind of thing you want to be starting to tell yourself. And actually, the more you meditate, Meditation creates neuroplasticity in the, neuroplasticity in the brain, makes it more malleable, so we can start to rewire our mind instead of going from fear and judgment to loving kindness and compassion for ourselves. So hope you have a beautiful day. I'm impressed that you've listened this far. This is longer than I thought, but hopefully if you haven't finished it, then maybe you can come back to it another time. And have a beautiful, beautiful day, and hope to see you soon. Okay, bye.